Folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you for joining this webinar this afternoon. Um, Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in this webinar sponsored by the Department of Family and Children Services Prevention Bureau and in partnership with the Community Engagement Specialist, Elizabeth Stewart. And we want to have special thanks to our training presenters, webinar presenters this afternoon, or Shantae Dent, who's a certified personal development coach, and she'll be able to introduce herself when she presents her information. We also want to thank Carissa Paulino with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And again, there's the Community Engagement Specialist, Elizabeth Stewart. My name is Byron Myers. I'm a program manager in the Prevention Bureau, and we sponsor these community webinars about every 3 months or so. Opioid use is having such a major impact on youth and families in our community. We dedicated a first webinar on this topic about 3 months ago, and thought that would be it'd be beneficial to have a part 2 to that webinar to go a little bit deeper on the negative impacts of opioids is having our community, but also provide strategies on how we can take better care of ourselves as service providers engaging with these youth and families. This topic is especially timely because I know, I'm sure a lot of you know, unfortunately, DFCS recently had a death of a baby that overdosed on opioids, and I'm sure that there are social workers on this webinar that has had a negative impact emotionally. So I'm hoping that this webinar provides additional information on opioid use, as well as strategies and how we can better take care of ourselves in supporting these families. So with that, I will pass it to Community Engagement Specialist, Elizabeth Stewart.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm excited.
Elizabeth, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make the disclaimer that we are having some technical issues as far as being able to see the presenters and ourselves. So at this point, it'll just be our voices that you'll be able to hear, and not our faces on the computer screen. So with that, Elizabeth, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thank you, Byron. So we're excited about, very excited about this webinar, Opioids Part 2, as Byron alluded to. A few minutes ago, we had a few months back, an earlier presentation on opioids, and the participants in that particular webinar had asked that we do some more follow-up and really hone in a little bit on self-care. So today's webinar, we're going to focus in on the resources and self-care, as well as strategies on talking to youth about opioids and fentanyl. So very excited to have Carissa Paulina and Shantae Dent. And we will have just a brief moment with Mario Canas of Midtown Services to talk about a little bit about what he's doing with naloxone. All right, next slide, please. All right. We always like to take a moment to talk about how we wish to engage. Applaud or give a thumbs up when supporting a comment. We want to build and maintain brave space, take space, make space, use that chat box or the Q&A box, one conversation at a time. I'll unmute unless you are talking. And remember, we are here to empower. All right, next slide. I wanted to take a pause before we dig into our webinar to take a minute and have a moment of silence. As you know, there's the war going on in Israel, on the Gaza. Ukraine is still at war. There's just a lot going on in the world right now. And I thought it would be very important for us to just take a moment of silence and acknowledge those that have suffered, those that have died, those that are responding, those soldiers. So let's just take just a brief moment and just have a moment of silence. All right. All right. Well, this is the opioid crisis in Santa Clara County with Carissa Paulino. And Carissa, I'm going to hand it over to you and go ahead and go forward.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Byron. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caressa Paulino. I am the Director of Physical Health and Wellness at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And I'm really glad to be here today, having this opportunity to briefly talk about the naloxone training and distribution project of the SCCOE, as well as the state of the opioid crisis in Santa Clara County, and later on in my presentation, provide the framing for conversations that we can have with youth around substance use. So I apologize, you cannot see me right now, but I am here and ready to engage with everyone. So the naloxone training and distribution project of the Santa Clara County Office of Education started as a response to the opioid crisis that is affecting not just the country, but our own county of Santa Clara. So this is a partnership between the SCCOE and the County of Santa Clara Behavioral Health Services Department and the Santa Clara County Opioid Overdose Prevention Project. The project started in October of last year, and since then we've been able to make strides on our goals. Next slide, please. So the project has 4 goals, and that the first one is developing partnerships between the different county agencies that support opioid awareness and prevention, as well as developing partnerships with school districts so that we can train their staff and provide school sites with the much needed life-saving naloxone. And one new update to our goals is that we've expanded our capacity to not just train staff, but also to bring opioid awareness and prevention lessons to students, and in turn, distribute naloxone to those students who are interested in obtaining one for home use. We've also been able to produce resources and provide technical assistance to schools, and these schools include public schools, charter schools, as well as private schools. And one of the most important goals that we have is establishing partnerships with families and community members, because we know that it will take a concerted effort to really address the problem of opioids in our community. Next slide, please. To date, through our project, we've been able to train 260 school district and county office of education staff on how you can recognize the signs of an opioid overdose, and how to administer Narcan in schools and in these office spaces. We've also been able to distribute close to 1,300 boxes of naloxone to school districts across Santa Clara County, and to community members who have participated in 3 community events that we've facilitated, 2 in San Jose and 1 here in Gilroy. And we've also been able to produce a naloxone training resource guide that's been shared to districts across the county. And this just helps them develop their policies and procedures around the use of naloxone in their schools. Next slide, please. And when I am asked, why do you engage in this work? This is the slide that explains my why. In Santa Clara County in 2021, there were 154 opioid-related overdose deaths, and 31 of those were youth aged 15 to 24. And 13 of those were youth aged 10 to 19. And part of my role as the Director of Physical Health and Wellness here in Santa Clara County Office of Ed is that I am the representative to the Child Death Review Team. And so the 13 youth aged 10 to 19 who died of fentanyl poisoning or opioid overdose. I know these kids. I've seen their pictures. I've looked at their writing samples. I've seen their grades. And it is a tragedy that we even have 13 youth who have succumbed to fentanyl poisoning. So this really drives me personally. This is my motivation for wanting to spread the word about the dangers of opioids and to provide communities with the strategies and the resources that they can use to address this problem. Next slide, please. I also want you to know that there was a 179% increase in the 15-year and 19-year-old range when it comes to opioid deaths in Santa Clara County. So that's quite a huge jump. And we know that this happened between 2019 and 2021, which was, the height of the pandemic. And later on, I will be talking about results from a national assessment that gives us an insight on the state of the effects of COVID-19 on the mental state of our youth. Next slide, please. And this is more recent data in Santa Clara County, and really shows how much fentanyl has flooded our community. In 2022, there were 164 recorded opioid deaths, and 155 of those 164 were actually fentanyl related. And 11 of those were youth aged 12 to 19. And again, these 11 children, I know them pretty well because I've had to review their records and interview their principals and their teachers. And I've shared out their stories to the child death review team. So I hope that these statistics will also continue to motivate you to spread the word about the dangers of opioids and to continue on, working with our youth. They really, really need our help. Next slide, please. Just some quick facts about fentanyl. So fentanyl is now involved in more American youth drug deaths than all of the other common drugs combined. And I'm talking about heroin, meth, cocaine, benzos, and prescription drugs. It's also involved in more deaths of Americans under the age of 50 than any other cause of death, which would include cancer, homicides, heart disease, suicide, and other accidents. And the reason for this is that there is so much fentanyl in the fake pills that have proliferated our communities. Next slide, please. And why is fentanyl so dangerous? It's because it's inexpensive, it's highly addictive in small quantities, and unlike other opioids, it is synthetically produced. So you don't need to plant acres and acres of poppy plants in order to produce fentanyl. It can be produced in a lab, and it's like I had mentioned, very, very addictive in small quantities. In this slide, you will see a small amount of fentanyl on the pencil tip, and that is actually a lethal dose for an adult. So that really shows you how dangerous this opioid is. Next slide, please. And what makes fake pills with fentanyl so dangerous is the way that these powders or these substances are mixed together in the illicit labs that produce these fake pills. So these places where they produce these fake pills are not sanitary or scientific, and they're not very precise. They're not precise at all, I should say, on with the way that they mix the substances. So what happens is that fentanyl is used as a filler, so that because it's inexpensive compared to other opioids, it allows um, the illicit drug manufacturers to increase their profit margins. So these substances are haphazardly mixed in containers and then pressed into tablets. And what happens is some pills will have more fentanyl than others, and any one pill can have a lethal dose. And while there are fentanyl test strips available in the community, it's not a very effective way of finding out if a pill has a lethal dose of fentanyl. First of all, if someone using fentanyl test strip decides to uh, break off a piece of the pill and dissolve it to test it, it could very well be that that broken off piece doesn't contain fentanyl, but the rest of the pill does. And also, if you dissolve an entire pill and test it, it doesn't mean that the other pills that are in the bag you purchased won't have a lethal dose of fentanyl. So in previous campaigns, there's that tagline, one pill can kill. And that's very true. A lot of um, the youth that have died from fentanyl overdoses or fentanyl poisoning do not have substance use disorder. In fact, some of them, it was their first time or only their second time taking illicit pills, and that proved to be the very last time they used it. So that's how dangerous fentanyl really is. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to shift a little bit. Having an understanding of the dangers of opioids, especially fentanyl, is only part of the solution. As practitioners, as parents, family members, and concerned citizens, we need to understand the youth perspective. What is their state? What is the state of their well-being? What do they know about substances? What makes them use substances? So, to learn more about the impact of COVID-19 on youth substance use, the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, with the support from the CDC, conducted national online assessments, discussion groups, key informant interviews, and also convened an expert advisory group of youth and youth serving advisors in 2021 and 2022. So this was a nationwide this was a nationwide online assessment with both youth serving providers and youth aged 13 to 18. And the goal of the assessment was to not only to assess the impact of COVID-19 on youth state of mind, but also to gain an understanding of the youth's knowledge and access to substances and substance use prevention, also messages and tools and resources. So in conjunction with expert opinion and available literature, these data informed the development of messages and resources to support youth substance use prevention. So a lot of the campaigns that came in 2022 and 2023 were really informed by the results of this assessment. So the results of this assessment showed that most youth reported a lack of fentanyl knowledge, and a majority of the youth respondents had concern that someone they know could be exposed to fentanyl while using drugs. and also that majority of youth respondents were aware that fentanyl is harmful, but they were not aware of how it might affect them. Youth also reported high levels of stress and social disconnection that puts them at risk for increased mental health concerns and substance use. So what this tells us is that systematic support for youth is important to help alleviate the stresses of the pandemic. And while, things seem to have returned to normal, we know that these stresses continue for our youth. But I also want to point out that there are also positive findings from this report. Though youth felt elevated levels of stress due to the pandemic, a majority responded positively to self-efficacy, resiliency, and optimism. So youth serving providers can approach youth from a strengths-based perspective when navigating conversations around substance use and the stress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Among the respondents in the national assessment, it showed that Asian American youth, about 60% of them, reported that they did not know about fentanyl. Homeschooled youth also were pretty high up there when it came to, that gap in knowledge, and also youth in 9th to 10th grade. So what this tells us is that when we are crafting messages or framing conversations, it's very important to know that we may need to do a little bit more outreach to Asian American youth, to homeschooled youth, and also youth in the 9th to 10th grade. Next slide, please. Although more than half of youth reported receiving some education about substance use in schools, only a third of youth reported awareness of existing prevention or cessation programs in their communities. The assessment results also identified demographic nuances in youth substance use perception and exposure, including perceived levels of harm. So levels of concern around substances, the likelihood of exposure to substances, and reasons for avoiding substances are helpful to know when having conversations with youth about substance use prevention. Next slide, please. So what matters most to young people? 76% of youth reported that mental health is one of or the most important thing for them. 60% of youth said family matters most to them more than anything. And that pretty low is 29% of youth said friends matter most to them. So what this tells us is building trust and rapport, including learning more about youth values, is an important first step in the communication pathway with youth. By understanding what matters most to youth, providers can incorporate youth values into conversations surrounding substance use. Rather than using values they may have thought were more meaningful to youth than they are. Next slide, please. So this next slide shows that, what we as adults or as providers perceive is that peers, friends, fitting in, and appearance are most important to youth. But in reality, majority of the respondents said that it was family that was most important to them. And also that healthcare providers and individuals who formerly used substances are the most trusted sources of accurate information when it came to substance use and prevention. And so the way we can frame conversations with youth is is by focusing on what's important to them. We know that one of the reasons they've reported for not using is the concern about messing up their future plans. They've also identified in-person or face-to-face conversations as the most effective engagement strategy, and they feel most comfortable talking to parents and guardians about substance use. Next slide, please. Despite caring about their mental health, youth still sometimes turn to substance use with the intent of improving their mental health or other challenging circumstances. The national assessment identified the top 4 reasons why youth said they might choose to use substances. So it's to cope with depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. 39% said that friends or other people they know are doing it. 34% said they use substances to cope with problems with family, friends, and school. And 30% said that they enjoyed it or think that it's fun. So it is essential that youth have access to information about healthy and sustainable coping mechanisms and self-care strategies. To cope with how they are feeling without using substances, youth reported that they would be most likely to turn into arts, including music, artwork, reading, and writing, followed by talking to friends and family or watching TV or playing video games. So knowing why youth choose to use substances is invaluable information for identifying risk and protective factors and deciding how to frame conversations for the selection of prevention messages that will most likely resonate. Based on an analysis of the assessment results, service providers and families can frame the conversation by focusing on discussions of the future, the risk of addiction, the important relationships in the youth's life, activities they can focus on to alleviate stress and encourage creativity, and how to build self-confidence and self-affirmation. And finally, who do youth trust? So they believe that doctors and nurses and other health, next slide, please. Next slide, please, sorry. So youth believe that doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers are the most trusted sources for accurate information around about substance use, but they feel most comfortable speaking with parents and caregivers and their friends and their peers. So it's crucial. This is crucial, a crucial finding actually, and we can really build on this because we know that youth need to feel that trust before they can open up about substance use. And there are some, these are other things to consider. No surprise, youth use the internet most often to look for information about substances. And the best way to communicate with youth would be in person. And youth believe that people who formerly used substances are a trusted source for information and are among those with whom they would be more comfortable speaking. So I'm also sharing some resources that I've used for this presentation. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share this information with you today. And I will turn it over to Byron or Liz.
Thank you, Carissa, for that for your sharing there. This PowerPoint will be sent out to all on the webinar today, so you will get this information hard copy as well. Thank you, Carissa. Can you go to the next resource page as well, Byron? Yes. So SAMHSA, which is a national program, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, here you'll see tons of resources, right, to talk to for parents to talk with their kids about, or if you're a caregiver, or if you're providing service as a social worker or a mental health facilitator, or mental health therapist, or or a wraparound facilitator even. You can still use these resources to help engage in conversation. So thank you again so much, Carissa. And I have your contact information at the very end of the presentation, so folks can reach out if they have any further questions. All right, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, oh, there's some more resources for you. Again, all this will be sent out to all participants. Yes, this one actually is really good for anyone, right? You can take the tips out, but specifically we wanted to highlight, as Byron mentioned in the beginning, that we've had a situation here at the county, at DFCS, in which a child died, and our social workers were connected to that situation. So anytime, we have a death in the department, that does, of course, impact all of us that are a part of the department, and how much more so that social worker that was involved. So some more resources for you. All right. Mario Canas, I think you are on. If you are, can you?
Yeah, I just unmuted.
Okay, great. So Mario is with the Midtown Family Services naloxone resource. He has, and Midtown offers naloxone to the community. So I wanted Mario to take a few minutes to talk about this resource. And again, his contact information will be in this slideshow as well. So Mario, go ahead and take a few minutes if you don't mind.
Okay, so what we do is like Elizabeth was saying, that we do offer Narcan. We don't ask no questions. We have a safe environment for individuals to come, and we are a distributor. So we have the resources to go ahead and give them what they need. I did have an individual, just to give you an example, of a young man came in. He picked up 4 boxes of Narcan. Reason being is he was going to a party. Like I said, I don't ask no questions, but I'd rather have the individual have the Narcan on hand than have one of his friends OD from fentanyl. I know that in this group setting, you probably have more statistics than I do. Just from what I was thumbing through, I think something like 57 homeless people died last year, in 2023, or during this year. I'm sorry, this year, just from homeless encampments. And that was over 57. And then we had a rise in Santa Clara County of 60% in individuals using this. So they range from all different ages. And fortunately, like we're hearing here on the webinar, is some of them very young. What we do with all the clients that come through our office, we offer them Narcan, and we ask them to put it in their glove box, or those that are in with backpacks, we ask them just to carry it in their backpacks. Not so much for them, but just in case they need one for wherever they're at, or wherever their environment that they're in. So we just highly recommend it. Like I said, we are a distributor, so we do have it on hand. Roughly, we probably have 100 boxes at any given time. So we are able to offer it to different people. I know we did a tabling at an event not too long ago, and we gave away something like 38 boxes to individuals in the community and different community organizations. So I know it is, even if we never had experienced it firsthand, I know that it is an epidemic that's hitting our community. And so we just want to offer our services to anybody that is in need of Narcan, just to go and reach out to us. I thank you for this opportunity to share with you all today. And just to let you know that we are here. And even if you need some for your office, if it's 10, 20, just reach out to us and we'll have that ready for you to pick up.
Great. So that means a social worker here at DFCS can come by, or a Pacific Clinics staff can come by, or Community Solutions. Anyone can come in.
Correct.
And okay, great,
Yeah.
great. Thank you, Mario. And I have your contact information again at the end of the slideshow. And this will go out to everyone, so they'll have your contact information.
Okay. And I do want to go ahead and say we do have the QR codes that are offered on each of the boxes to go ahead and give everybody an opportunity to get trained on Narcan. We also have it here in office. If
great.
you haven't had the opportunity to learn how to do it, it's a very safe and easy way to do. There's videos on each of the boxes that you go ahead and use QR code. So that way, if you feel nervous about administering it, there's an actual simple YouTube video that the QR code will take you to, and it gives you step by step.
Great.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you, Mario. Man, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time to come on and share that resource. All right. And next we have up Shantae Dent, and who is a life coach and a facilitator, and does a lot of work as a dealing with emotional and psychological health and wellness. And so we thought, based on the response from our last opioids webinar, that we would bring in someone to talk about self-care. So I'm going to turn it over to Shantae.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. And hello, everyone. Excited to be here. It is an honor to be in a position to support you all, where you clearly serve individuals who are in great need of what you have to offer. So I want to begin by thanking you, thanking each and every one of you for the services that you provide. It's essential. As we know, it's life-changing. Now, because of the weight of your work and your service, it is imperative that each of us has a self-care system in place. As I go through the presentation, we'll come to understand that self-care is a non-negotiable. And I imagine many of you are probably in that space where you can attest to the importance of self-care. I'd like for you to think for a second about the last time you were on an airplane. We can all agree that one of the most important statements we heard was prior to the airplane taking off. We were told emergency protocols. And amongst the emergency protocols, we're told that in the event of an emergency, it's important that we take care of ourselves first. And can you imagine if you're sitting next to your young child or your grandparent, as much as you love them and care for them, you truly desire to ensure they are safe and secure. Even so, your first instruction, the first initiative is for you to take good care of yourself. And I believe we can all agree that the reason we are to take good care of ourselves is so we can be in much better shape, in a stronger position to care for others. I have had the honor of serving survivors of sexual trauma years ago, and have had my stories and my experiences of not taking good care of myself. So I know firsthand of what it looks like when we take care of ourselves versus being on autopilot, serving, giving, serving, without implementing self-care. I want to start by sharing with you all the 5 pillars of self-care. Now, the 5 pillars of self-care, as you'll see, are going to be areas that you can break down and implement in a way that works for you, for your lifestyle, for your values, for your personality as well. Now, these 5 pillars are essential. You can extract what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I'll go through each pillar step by step, expanding on what that could possibly look like in your life as you implement self-care. And so we'll start with physical self-care. What can that look like in your life? Next slide, please. Under the category of physical self-care, you'll find that regular exercise and various forms of physical activity is a great deal of it, just getting out and being active. And for some of us, it might look like a daily routine of having a set time every morning, every afternoon, or every evening. We are going to commit to the gym, walking around our neighborhood. Or it might look like you walking around during your lunch break. And this is where you can get creative and take a baby step. If you already have a physical self-care routine in motion, continue that process. If not, begin with something simple, incorporate it into your schedule, and follow up with those healthy eating habits as well. We hear a lot about you are what you eat, and we understand the importance of that. If we load ourselves with a lot of junk food, then we might feel a little junky. But if we switch our nutrition and begin to add items that will give us strength, energy, optimize our level of focus, we'll be able to see those results in terms of taking good care of ourselves physically. Now, sufficient rest and sleep, I imagine some of you all are probably saying, Shantae, you have no idea between what's going on in my head and what's set before me, the things that I hear and the things that I see, I cannot sleep or I cannot rest. And this is where even incorporating a consistent routine. So for example, you might have to go back to the days of when you were a child, setting your bedtime to be consistently. And I'll just throw a number out there. It might not be realistic for some of you all, but let's say it's 9:30 p.m. and you commit to getting in bed at 9:30 p.m. every night. That alone will allow your body to get on a system that shows your body, I'm taking good care of you. And guess what? Your body will respond. Also, these are typical, getting enough hydration, regular medical checkups. Again, these are some of the basic steps that one could implement in order to take good care of themselves physically. Now, when we look at our next pillar, we're going to talk about emotional self-care. Now, when it comes to our emotions, I want to add here that sometimes our thought process about emotional self-care can be derived from our childhood. It can mimic what we saw growing up from our parents, our family members, and it's either healthy or unhealthy. And so whatever you have learned about emotional care, emotional well-being, I would encourage you to maintain an open mind and to consistently be in a position where you are constantly evolving when it comes to your emotional well-being. Now, there are various forms that we can implement in order to take care of ourselves emotionally. As you see, there's stress management techniques. Now, this day and age, we clearly have the access at our fingertips. Most of us have smartphones, and there are a number of apps that we can take advantage of in order to help us maintain our stress. We also want to be able to express ourselves without electronics being a part of the process. I am an avid journaler. I believe that when you can get anything that's, whether it's overly exciting you or overbearing, express it through writing from your head onto the paper, from your heart onto paper, getting yourself used to and accustomed to expressing your emotions. That can happen through writing it out or talking to someone that you trust, talking to a therapist, but knowing that you don't have to keep it inside. And I love to balance this out by saying the negative and the positive, because when we want to celebrate and we're overwhelmed with joy and excitement and we have a win, by all means, connect with someone and share that good news. And on the flip side, when you feel heavy and there's a lot going on in your life and in your space, please do reach out. Now, I love to consider what your hobbies are. What brings you joy? What do you love engaging in? I believe sometimes we can minimize those things that we are naturally gravitated towards because we think, oh, that's just something I enjoy. Well, no, hey, that's a big deal. That can change the trajectory of your day, of your month, or even your year if you intentionally pursue activities that bring you joy. What relaxes you? I like to say, what's your happy place? Go to that place physically or mentally when you know that it's time for you to take a strategic pause and implement emotional self-care. And I absolutely love this final step where it's important to practice compassion and self-kindness. We're going to go and dive into this a little bit in another slide. But how many of us are so hard on ourselves? Now, this is a moment of self-reflection. Are you hard on yourself? Do you beat yourself up when you drop the ball? Because you know that you're not perfect, it's not possible, but at the same time, secretly, you're striving for perfection, which only adds to the heaviness of the guilt and the frustration. So practice that self-compassion, self-kindness, implement a reward system. How do you thank yourself? You know, how do you tell yourself, good job? How do you pat yourself on the back? So taking good care of yourself, your emotional self-care is an essential pillar. Now let's go ahead and talk about our next pillar of self-care. We're going to talk about the social self-care. In this arena, this is important because even when we feel like we want to live in a shell, we want to live in the corner somewhere and not relate to other people, and we all have seasons where we want to keep to ourselves. Sometimes it's because of an experience, a bad or a negative situation that we've encountered with someone, and then we conclude that it's best to pull away. Well, I understand the feelings and emotions that lead up to that decision, but I also want to encourage you to stray away from that mindset because we are created to interact with individuals. We're not made to do this life alone. And you're especially not made to be that caregiver, that social worker, to do it alone. You need that support. So have those relationships, identify, we're familiar with your inner circle. Identify your inner circle. Who are those individuals that you can go to no matter what, on the good, the bad, and anything else in between? You want to be able to clearly identify those individuals, maintain a healthy relationship with them. So you know that I know who I'm going to call on when I need to, have a good time, or when I need to vent, when I need to process, when I need to seek wisdom. Who are you going to reach out to? So allowing yourself to lean on other people is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength because you know how to maintain a healthy balance. So ensure that you are establishing social self-care by connecting with individuals. And this can be a balance between your professional as well as your personal world. I believe it's important that you engage in healthy work relationships, that you're not crossing one another's paths just on the work-related issues, that you're actually able to humanize your experience and create healthy relationships there as well. Now, under pillar number 4, we have professional self-care. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time here. In this arena of establishing professional self-care, as you see, yes, seek supervision and support in your professional work. I have, the list of things that you can implement, continuously learn, which is a part of what you're doing today, showing up today. Being able to balance your work, your professional life as well. And most importantly, I believe, is to be able to recognize and address the signs of burnout, of compassion fatigue. Now, I'm going to spend some time talking about employer support. Now, this is important because outside of that social support, where you are connecting with individuals who, in fact, love you, care for you, and they are in your life to support you, they genuinely might not have a clue of what it feels like, of what the experience is like, of what that heavy weight feels like of being a service provider or a social worker. And this is where professional self-care must be highlighted and implemented. Now, if you have something in place in your place of work, within your teams or your organizations, I commend you and I encourage you to continuously provide that support. But if the professional self-care is foreign, I would highly encourage you to put a system in place immediately. And I say that because you know what it's like because you're in it. So can you imagine the heaviness that your colleagues can experience as well with this line of work? And so what can employer support look like? Here's some ideas that you could jot down if you're taking some notes. Regular check-ins. Now, this is pretty consistent amongst all organizations overall, for-profit, not-for-profit, but ensuring that you have on the calendar consistent check-ins, not only in the event of an emergency, my office doors are open, I'm a phone call away, shoot a text or a message. No. In terms of celebrating wins, as well as having the opportunity to talk about those low points, every week or even every other week, supervisors, employers, and employees should know that there is a regular check-in on that calendar. And your check-ins don't have to be 30 minutes to an hour. You might have a 15-minute check-in. But what's important is that individuals know that they are invited to the table to talk, to share, to assess their well-being and their stress levels. And what also benefits from your regular check-ins, supervisors, when you're meeting with your colleague might be in autopilot, not in a place to recognize that they're burned out. But it's that check-in that can serve as a saving grace to say, I'm identifying some areas of concern here. And in that moment, you can address key points that could help put that individual back on track. And so having those regular check-ins as well as peer support, depending on the work environment, you might be able to schedule monthly outings where you're able to reflect, release, debrief, and discuss. Maybe there's some challenging cases where you need to share your feelings and your peers can provide insight as well as emotional support. The point here is that we create that space. How many times have we heard our friends going through a difficult time or a family member experiencing a difficulty? And out of the goodness of our heart, we say, I'm here for you. I'm a phone call away. If you need anything, let me know. This is coming from the goodness of our heart. They're also common statements that we say and we often don't follow up on, or the person on the receiving end, they don't follow up. And so instead of just saying, I'm here for you as your lead supervisor, if you're having a tough case, I'm here for you. Instead of leaving it with those words, take a step further and schedule those check-ins on an ongoing basis. Now, I imagine you all have debrief processes in place. If not, doesn't hurt to mention creating a space for social workers and service providers to be able to debrief. Debriefing is essential because how many of us, especially if you are working in a hybrid environment or the virtual environment, you don't want to you want to be careful, I'll say, careful not to take the work home. Careful not to dump on your significant other or even your children, unless they are in a space where they can healthily assist you. That can be a fine line. So having a debrief in place so that you can release the heaviness and process that case, that interaction, so that when you transition to your personal home environment, you would have done your absolute best to leave that in a different space, in a different category, and transition to your home and be present for your family, for your friends, for your spouse, your significant others. Now, I want to talk a little bit about teamwork here. I think we can all agree that it's a mindset, it's a heart, it's a passion where we're all in this together. But I want to encourage all of you all, the social workers, service providers, to continue to collaborate with one another. Encourage one another, share resources with one another, and let your colleagues know that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay that they are not alone, even if it's their specific case. Just having that open door policy where individuals know that they can lean on one another for support. And continuously providing education. So this is a message to the supervisors, to those who are in over, if you have direct reports, you want to ensure that you are providing training and education, helping your team, that they are able to consistently create healthy boundaries, implement self-care, ensure that they're not burned out. This is going to help you all understand the importance, the ongoing importance of implementing self-care and knowing that your employer has your best interests at heart. Thank you. We'll go on to number 5, the 5th pillar of self-care. Under self-care, under spiritual self-care, excuse me, there are a lot of different avenues that can be covered when we consider spiritual self-care. And this is where you can take a deep dive into reflection and meditation. Very important to have your moment of introspection, a moment of you focusing on that inner self-work, where you're seeking from wherever your source is, that you're seeking guidance, that you're seeking clarity. And being mindful and present, this is key when it comes to ensuring that you're not burned out or you're not worn out, because you are connected and you're in tune from an internal space. I also love the idea of showing gratitude. There's something about gratitude that can change your mindset when you can focus on the positivity in your world, the positivity in your life. And even when you are writing out, if you journal, if you express yourself through writing, that would be an excellent opportunity to jot down 3 to 5 things. What are you grateful for? And that can help you ensure that you are taking good care of yourself from an internal perspective. Some of us have religious practices that we incorporate. Others, it's all about just simply connecting with others, building and nurturing those meaningful relationships that we have established in our lives. I imagine, as we opened our session today, the webinar today, that there's so much on our minds because of what's going on in our world today. And some of you might feel overwhelmed. Everywhere you look, everywhere you turn, there is an issue, there is a problem. And that might in fact be the case. Even more so, why it's important that we implement some form of spiritual self-care, because this is the self-care that truly is all about you, and it starts from within. And so if you could identify what spiritual self-care can you implement, and for some of us, it's, let's just take a weekend and go on a retreat. Let me find a place for solitude and self-reflection. Perhaps there's yoga, or even volunteering. I think this is another opportunity to just express yourself, express some of your values. You can engage in a particular act of service and to seek guidance. What's important overall is that we know that we are never alone. It might feel like we're alone. We may have seasons and days where we feel alone, but I assure you that if you step out, you can identify resources, spiritual leaders, mentors, even therapists Who can you bring into your inner circle that will help you explore and deepen your spiritual self-care? And even with this being an internal work, of the 5 pillars, you don't have to go at it by yourself. You don't have to feel like you're out there trying to figure it out all on your own. It's definitely an opportunity, as we talked about, even under the professional self-care, if you are able to create a database of where your team members and colleagues can go for certain concerns, specific issues, who can they turn to? What are some resources? Have those in place. I like to call it a toolkit. You can have that toolkit in place and be proactive. So in the event of an emergency, you're not scrambling and feeling as if you're going crazy. What am I going to do? I know I need to implement self-care, but what exactly is that again? What did Shantae say again? What does that look like for my life? And then you just feel even more overwhelmed. So go ahead and be proactive and create that toolbox. And your toolbox might look like a list of items. When I feel overwhelmed and you list it out, here's what I'm going to do. This is who I'm going to call. Because think about this, you all. When we are not proactive, oftentimes the pressure of that real life situation can lead us to irrational thinking. And when we're not thinking rationally, my goodness, there is no telling what the outcome will be. And so if we consider for a moment, when we are interacting with families and individuals who are indeed struggling, in pain, it's important that as much as you love and care for them, and you're there to serve them wholeheartedly, in order to do it and do it well, it is essential that you take good care of yourself. Next slide. Now, this is included in the handout. It's a brief summary of what we've shared. And so if you want to print it and put it in your back pocket, post it somewhere, it's to serve as your resource, your reminder, feel free to do that. And just have that immediate quick reference on hand, everything compressed for you in that document. Thank you. Now I want to talk to you guys about the impact of neglecting self-care. There's the big don't do it. Now, this might not be new to you because you've probably already experienced it. But just in case you've gone through what you see here on the screen and you think it's okay, I am here to tell you it's a red flag. So when you are experiencing the following: compassion fatigue and burnout, when you are exhausted emotionally and you feel like your resilience has decreased. And how about this, those strained relationships? That's probably an extremely common sign, a common red flag. Reduced job satisfaction, we see high turnover, or even those physical health implications. A lot of our health-related issues are connected to stress, to the fact that we will in one way or another neglect our self-care, or we don't have the adequate support that we need in order to show up present and fully equipped to serve our clients, our families. And then we create our moral and ethical dilemmas. And how about superhero syndrome? Now I'm going to spend a few minutes on 2 of the impacts, and it's compassion fatigue and superhero syndrome. As social workers and service providers, I imagine that when it comes to your emotional and your mental and your physical well-being, if there's any hit to either one of those areas, you feel it. And when it comes to the compassion fatigue, it's really when there's a sense of exhaustion and you're pretty much in distress because of the details of your case, and you're emotionally depleted. You're witnessing the suffering of others. You're addressing the suffering of others, and you're emotionally depleted. This is when you might experience a decrease in your empathy. You can say, I remember when I began in this field, I used to, but now, God. And this is real, transparent conversation here. Now, it's difficult for you to connect with the emotions of the individuals that you're trying to help. Or what if you just simply, you don't have a satisfaction with your work anymore? You've lost your enthusiasm, you've lost your passion for your work, and you might even find it difficult to concentrate. Some of us withdraw. You don't want to be a part of that social activity. You just let me show up, serve my client, and be gone and be done with it and move on to the next. And we talked earlier about the sleep disturbances, and this is a real, real, real situation. Nightmares, insomnia, other sleep-related issues due to the persistent thoughts and the emotions that are related to the clients you serve. And what about guilt? What about shame? And that's where we become so engaged that we take in that superhero syndrome. And I understand there is a line, and sometimes that line can be extremely thin because we show up to serve, and we often want to rescue and become that savior. It's common. I want you to know that it is common. And I also want to share the dangers with superhero syndrome, the danger with having a savior complex or the rescuer syndrome. And if you find that you are in that space, I would encourage you to shift from, I'm not here to save the client, the family, the individual. I am here to empower the family, the client, the individual. And when you need additional help and support, or if you need to delegate, by all means, please do. So if you've experienced any of the signs here, if you're currently experiencing the signs here, these are red flags showing that perhaps there might need to be a few adjustments, an opportunity for you to give a bit more attention to self-care. Starting there with those baby steps and slowly making changes so that you can continue to show up as your best version for yourself, for your colleagues, for those families that you serve as well. Now, what about the benefits? Let's transition and end it on that bright note, on a high note. What are the benefits of normalizing self-care? So this should excite you. So if you've ever toiled and minimized, oh, that self-care talk, I know it's a fad. Here's proof, I'm hoping, that will convince you to implement self-care on a daily basis. And so when you're able to incorporate self-care tips and tendencies, when you are taking good care of yourself, you'll find that there is definitely a decrease in burnout. You can position yourself to show up refreshed and ready. And you walk away at the end of the day, at the end of the case, satisfied, because you know that you showed up and you did your absolute best to provide the tools and the resources and support. And you're able to feel good about serving your clients, feel good about contributing and adding value to your organization and to your team. And what about resilience? We know all about that now, don't we? Social workers and service providers, you can increase your resilience when you implement self-care. And we talked about professional self-care. So how about positive organizational culture? Can you imagine if all of our offices and companies and organizations, all of our teams had that standard of positive organizational culture, whatever that looks like, we're going to implement? Can you imagine what that would do? Oh, that would work wonders in our world, in our environments, in terms of how we show up and serve one another. And it starts with taking good care of yourself. And what about this, the stigma that hovers around mental health? Now, I believe we can all agree and say we have come a long way. We have normalized mental health, thank goodness. We've come a long way. And so when we normalize self-care, we destigmatize mental health. We say, if you need help, make that phone call, schedule that appointment, go talk to someone. It is for your good and the good of everyone who comes in contact with you. We don't have to hide or be ashamed anymore. If we're struggling, reach out. And then you'll find that it overflows into your professional growth. You begin to desire and long to learn more. And that gives you an opportunity to grow more and provide greater services to your clients as well. And that work-life balance is something that I believe many of us are continuously striving for now. I don't know if we can put a period there. Continuously creating a stronger work-life balance. And that's what good self-care does for you. Enhances your personal well-being as well. Now, I don't know about you, but when I look at this list, I'm saying, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's the life that I would like to live. And when I look at myself in the mirror, or when people look at my life, I want it to be a reflection. That's someone who takes good care of themselves. And so I'm wondering, when you take a look at your life, your personal life, your professional life, when people take a look at you, are those the words and the thoughts that come to mind? That's an individual who takes good care of themselves. And if not, it's not too late to make the necessary adjustments. Now, when it comes to any form of self-care, I want to remind you all that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's really about you finding practices that resonate with you. What will help you? What will allow you to feel connected, balanced, and at peace with your world, at peace with yourself, and even at peace with those you serve? When I talk about this compassion fatigue and superhero syndrome, finding that balance where you will show up ready to make a difference. And you will also stay far away from feeling as if you are responsible for saving the individual. And that is a difficult ask. I know it is. Because yes, when we are talking about individuals losing their lives to an overdose, that is life-shattering. Yes, indeed, it is. And so even more so, taking good care of yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically is crucial so that you're ready to hear the stories and feel the pain. I often say that denial leads to destruction. So by any means am I telling you not to feel? Absolutely not going to say that. You should feel it. You are a human being, and I'd be quite concerned if you didn't feel it. The key is, how are you going to put self-care practices in place so that you can feel it so that you can process, so that you can proceed. Now, when I think about self-care, I'm reminded of the importance of a few emotional intelligence components. And there are two in particular that come to mind, and it's self-regard and self-awareness. And this is where it all starts, really. Because when it comes to self-regard, it's all about you respecting yourself, having confidence in your abilities, believing in your own worth. Like, you know, I bring value. I am a phenomenal social worker. I am a phenomenal service provider. I do what I do well, exceptionally well. And you are confident. You know that you matter. You know that you have inherent value. Self-regard. What does that look like for you? I'd like you to ponder on that question. And what about self-awareness? When you are self-aware, you are in a position where you can reflect on your feelings and on your motivations. And you have the ability to recognize when you are out of alignment. And the moment you see those red flags, in fact, we're not waiting for the red flag. When you see a yellow flag, a yellow light, slow down and pay attention and make adjustments until you find that you are in this green zone where you say, okay, the green light, I can proceed. But pay attention to the cues, those internal cues, becoming self-aware and being a person who has high self-regard. And so as you all continue with this journey of serving others, I would highly encourage you to develop that self-care routine. What's in your toolbox, and how will you implement self-care? This quote, I believe, is appropriate for each of you here today. It says that self-care is not a luxury. It's a vital practice for those who dedicate their lives to caring for others. I hope that you would never minimize the work you do. You know that you save lives. You help individuals put their lives back on track. And the moment it doesn't manifest the way you desired, if the life isn't saved, if the person doesn't get back on track, if the family, unfortunately, is never restored, even in the midst of that pain or even disappointment, I would hope that you would continue taking good care of yourself for your sake and for the sake of those who love you and care for you, as well as those whom you love and whom you are caring for. They need you. They need you strong, and they need you healthy. Thank you all so much for showing up today, and thank you for the services that you provide. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Shante.
My pleasure.
Before we actually, Byron, can we go back up to that slide of the five points of self-care, the 5 pillars? Yeah, the first slide. Yes. So Shante, thank you so much. I'm going to pose a couple questions to you. And by the way, y'all feel free to ask some questions in the Q&A, and I'll read those off. We can look at those. Put some questions in there that you might have for Shante or Carissa.
Yes,
or
please.
Mario. So Shantae, one question I have for you. During our last webinar that we did a few months back, one of our county service providers expressed how difficult it was to carry the stress of not knowing if the youth that they're working with is going to overdose or not.
Mm.
And she was expressing how hard that is to let go and just let it be. She was just carrying the weight and the stress of, is this kid going to die on me tonight or not? Based on the, what he was going through and his choices to continue to use opioids. And that actually was the question that prompted me to really think about how to, include our self-care as a part of this. And so the fear of, losing somebody, or fear, anybody that provides any type of self-care in the context of community work or mental health, or, even as social workers, as Byron again mentioned in the beginning of the webinar when we started, that unfortunately we had a child death. And imagining, those social workers directly involved there, how they are holding that. But I wanted you to speak a minute specifically to that situation where that caregiver or that service provider is walking that line of that high level of stress, that line of, man, I don't know if my kid is going to make it through the night. I don't know if he's going to live or not. Can you share some thoughts on that?
It brings me back to the superhero syndrome, and I can't help but categorize what can I control versus what I cannot control.
That's good.
And then comes this powerful, strong word, influence.
Mm.
And so if we can take the time to categorize, and I've said it multiple times, writing down, because I believe we can stay stuck in our head and in our thoughts for so long that it really can stress us out. And so writing it down, like, go back to those elementary school days where we took out our pen and our pencil and our paper and say, write down, what can I control? List that out. What can I not control? List that. And how can I influence this young kid? Because what we've come to understand is we cannot control people. I mean, we don't need to give examples. We've tried, doesn't work out so well, does it? So we can influence them. I would encourage the individual who's heavy with those experiences to start there and identify, what can you control, what can you not control, and how can you put the most energy into influencing. And it reminds me of that parent-child relationship, that once you put in the work, the time, the hours, the wisdom, and the resources, there comes that moment where you release them. And yes, sometimes the outcome is heartbreaking and detrimental. And then I go circle back around to self-regard, that if that situation causes you to fall apart, how will you be able to continue to help yourself and others?
That's good. That's good. That's good. I think the other scenario that happens a lot as service providers in the area of, social work or mental health or community-based support, such as wraparound programs, is that you're there because families present a need. And so while you're working and supporting and empowering that family, it's so easy to experience countertransference or transference. Can you let's talk a little bit about countertransference?
Oh yes. So there, I feel like there's so many levels in aspects and directions we can take here.
Mm-hmm.
I I know we all have different learning styles. I just want to give you a quick analogy, if you can visualize this. You know the bubbles that little kids like to blow? The little cheap little bubbles, they blow those bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
I early on had to see myself in one of those bubbles for a number of reasons. When you think about the film of a bubble, it's so thin, it's so clear. And if you can envision yourself in that bubble, so yes, you see everything, you hear everything, and you even you could feel it because that film is thin, right? But you create that film that allows a healthy boundary. And this is all about us making that choice. It really is, because it's easy for us to get caught up in what we're experiencing and what the family is experiencing and their hurt and their pain. And we definitely want to express empathy and compassion and feel with them, feel for them. And knowing that we must separate their trauma like from our services. And that takes practice, because it means that, number one, I might be triggered because of what this family is experiencing. And so I'll have to identify and acknowledge if I'm being triggered because of what I went through or what my family went through or what my friends experienced. How do I ensure that I'm addressing this trigger? Well, I acknowledge I'm being triggered and I am, I might need to step away. I might need my backup to show up and step in for me for a moment. I might need a break here.
That's good. That's good. And I think these are, when you're directly working with folks, and I often think about the social workers in terms of their legal responsibility and the stressor of carrying that legal responsibility on top of, working with families, that there's a lot that you manage and you juggle when you're trying to be present, right? When you're trying to be present with families. And so when you're struggling, as you indicated here on the 5 pillars, when you're struggling with managing those, that's where I see often that countertransference can come in. You start taking on everybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
Not even realizing it. It happens so subtly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would even encourage the individual that knows this is a big stressor for them, on a daily basis, process. And your processing might be as simple as writing down, what did today look like for me? What positive, what can I show gratitude for? What took place that did not settle well with me? What bothered me? Like if we could slow down and be intentional and have those moments of introspection, I do truly believe that is half of the battle. A lot of times that will allow us to process and accelerate that process. Other times it could look like scheduling that appointment and meeting with that therapist to process and learn how to implement tools. Because here's what I love about self-care tools. They can fluctuate, but a lot of times once we have them in place, they will be our go-tos and they will serve us well for in the long term. But here's the deal. We can hear this all day and say, it sounds good. That's an excellent idea. Thank you for sharing. And it feels good because it sounds good. But it's not until we implement that we'll experience change. that will experience less, that will know how to process, I'll say.
Mhm.
Because we can't change those circumstances that the families and the clients endure. We can't change those circumstances. But the power lies in terms of how we process and how we respond.
Mhm.
And so, yes, first acknowledging what we are experiencing. And we can start by identifying it, writing it out, and figuring out what should that next step be. Am I able to process on my own by releasing this heaviness, this stress,
Mhm.
without feeling, so attached that it becomes my own? Or do I need to incorporate additional help so that I can manage and work through the heavy cases in a healthy manner?
That's great. That's great. The other thing you said was that was pretty was important, very important, was about the culture, the organizational environment, and implementing processes that really are that are uplifting or cause you to look at strengths and then areas where I want to become stronger. And a lot of that's around languaging, right? How we language things, but that other piece is putting in processes where, maybe even a check-in can start off with, what's working, or what do you consider successes right now? So just really setting a culture where we're looking at, not ignoring or denying if there's something wrong, but starting at a place where we're able to acknowledge what's working and what is okay. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. In a workshop that I teach pretty often on emotional intelligence, we often use the analogy of a braided rope. And we have this visual of a braided rope, and we ask our participants, like, what can each of those braided ropes look like for you, for your team, or for your organization?
Mm-hmm.
And a part of this exercise is to brainstorm and identify, how can we ensure that that braided rope stays tightly knit? And if we don't put a process or a procedure in place, that braided rope will soon unravel.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
And when the braided rope unravels, it might start in the office, but as we all know, eventually it will seep out into how we show up and serve our clients and our families. And along the same line of, it's great to talk about how wonderful this culture could be if we were to. But I would challenge everyone to take that first step. What could that look like? And it could be a one-pager of 10 resources. Here are 10 resources that we want you to know are available for you. It could look like some type of award system where you're showing your team members and your colleagues how greatly they are appreciated. And when individuals are experiencing that level of support, we do, I believe, minimize turnover. And we also help to equip them as they go out and serve our communities.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Wow, we could continue on this all day, man. This is some good stuff, Shantae. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
This is great. I put in the Q&A box, kind of the question that you would ask to the group was, what does self-regard and self-awareness look like for you? So I hope you take some time to reflect on that. Does anybody else have any questions? I think there was a question about information from Mario I'll have his contact information, but you can connect with him and he'll give you all the information regarding how to access Narcan from Midtown Health Services. All right, so resources, self-care for social workers. Again, this will be sent out to everyone. This is taken from the socialwork.org content. So take some time to look through those podcast episodes, self-care for social workers during the pandemic. So, probably some ideas from there that can still, support setting appropriate boundaries, giving yourself permission to feel your feelings. That's really important, that we don't deny our feelings, that we don't, just ignore them, or I'll deal with it another day, because that other day is still be another day and another day and another day, and it'll catch up with you. So, yeah, resources for social workers, self-care. Next one, Byron. More resources. This NASW, the National Association for Social Workers, had some good stuff there. And this is a practical guide to self-care for helping professionals, the third one, that actually addresses some practical suggestions for wraparound professionals. I worked wraparound for 16 years, and you really are, you have to be the jack of all trades when you are facilitating, or a family specialist when you're in the community and supporting families. It's a pretty complex role. And so the self-care for any wraparound team would be really important. Of course, dealing with secondary trauma, and of course on the bottom here, the professional quality of life. So those were just all resources that we want to avail to you. And the next slide, the contact information. You can take a picture of this right now if you'd like. But again, this will be sent out to all of our participants. Does anyone have a burning question? If so, raise your hand and Byron can take you off mute. Anybody have any burning questions? Okay. All right. Well, feel free to, again, put it in the Q&A box if you'd like. Great. Byron, I'm going to hand it over to you. Oh, let me mention one thing before we go. I will be sending over to everyone a survey, if you could fill out regarding this webinar today, that would be great. And Byron, let me hand it over to you to wrap us up.
Sure. Thanks everybody for participating in the webinar this afternoon. I hope you got some valuable information. As we have to start looking at ourselves, our social workers, as first responders, because that's what we are. As police run towards crime and firemen run towards fire, us social workers, we run towards traumatic events dealing with the safety and risk of children. So we are first responders too, and we need to treat ourselves that way and have the protocols established to make sure that we're able to take care of ourselves when we also are involved with traumatic events, and that we have our self-care plan established. And today's a Friday, so this is a great time going into a weekend to really reflect on what your self-care plan is, and hopefully start that, if not tonight, then tomorrow for sure. So with that, I hope everybody has a great weekend. We thank you for your participation. And again, please take time to fill out the survey. And if you have any suggestions for valuable webinars that we should focus on in the future, please let us know. So thank you and have a great weekend. And I also want special thanks to Carissa, Shantae, and Mario. Really appreciate your time and effort, and the valuable information that you provided this afternoon. So thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Thank you.